Here on 2, we begin a new series that uncovers the treasures of the deep. Discoveries underwater.
In autumn 1987, a spectacular sale of underwater treasure took place at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, Nevada. The treasure came from the Nuestra Senora de Atocha, a Spanish galleon sunk off the coast of Florida in 1622.
$6,500 is now bid. At $6,500 goes $7,000. $6,500.
The glittering booty attracted bidders from all over the world, interested in buying a small piece of history.
You have the bid. Item number 99 are 3 silver coins and 1,000 for the lot. 1,100. 1,100 is bid. 12, 13, 1,300.
The hoard of gold, silver, coins and precious stones was brought up from beneath the sea by Mel Fisher, the most successful treasure hunter of all time.
No advance.
Amongst the items for sale were a gold bowl valued at almost $1 million,
Silver coins. And we'll start the bidding out at
a silver salver
this lot. 16.
expected to reach $2,500,
550. Is there any
and several gold bars estimated at over $200,000 each.
buyer number 222?
Even copper ingots were highly priced.
Item number 57 is another copper ingot. $200 for this lot. 25. 250. 75. 275 is now the bid. Go 300. 275. 300 is here. 25. 325 the absentee bid there. 350 the gentleman in front of me. 350 is now the bid. Is there any advance at 350? 25. Thank you. 375 is that the gentleman in blue? Yes. 400 is now my bid in front. 400 is the gentleman directly in front of me here. At 400, is there any advance?
I've been watching the studies and work of Mel Fisher for the last 10 years, off and on, as it's reported in National Geographic and in the newspaper, and I think a lot of people are aware of the discovery and the magnitude. There's a lot of coins, a lot of other treasure, the silver, the ingots, and I think there'll be quite a bit of interest.
There's never been gold ingots like this offered before. The large gold chains, the various artifacts. This is the first time that any of this has ever been offered for public sale. The publicity over the Atocha has done wonders for treasure hunting and for historians. It's also done wonders for coin collectors. It's created a lot of new interest in this field, not only just in coins, but in the artifacts as well.
Selling historical artifacts in this way to private individuals is considered by most archaeologists as unethical. It does not happen in publicly financed excavations.
I think that history has no place whatsoever for private enterprise to make a personal profit for one person through the destruction of the site. Someone could tear down the Tower of London and make a lot of money selling the stones, but we wouldn't allow it, society wouldn't allow it, so why should we allow them to do this with shipwrecks? The treasure hunters say the archaeologists talk big because they have no treasure. We're finding gold and silver and priceless objects on a Bronze Age shipwreck 170 feet deep, but we have no claim to own it. It is for the world, it is for the public, it is for knowledge, it's to be kept together as a unit.
In 1984, Mel Fisher was still searching for the treasure which was to make him famous. His enterprise is privately funded.
We've been doing this for 14 years now, back and forth and back and forth. We've searched hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles using all different kinds of detectors. It seems about each year we develop a new model or a better detection system or a better navigation system, and so then we redo the whole thing all over again, figuring that the new detector would find it better than the one we had the year before.
Mel, a former chicken farmer from Indiana, is sweeping the Gulf of Mexico in his quest for the main cargo, the mother load, as he calls it, from the wrecks of the Atocha and her sister ship, Margarita. They sank in a hurricane on their way back to Spain from South America in 1622.
There's about another 47 tons of silver and gold on the Atocha, and the Spaniards had gotten about half of the Margarita when they worked there 350 years ago, and we found maybe 10%. So there's still another 40% of the Margarita still out there too, scattered all over the ocean floor. It was very hard to find. We've got a whole fleet of ships out there, but they're just bringing in a little things here and there, and any day now we're going to find that big bonanza, you know.
We've found elements of Atocha 7 miles apart. It's not the same thing as some of the wreck sites in the Mediterranean that have sunk in deep water and are relatively intact, even though they're considerably older. This one's the equivalent of a high-speed airplane crash, and it scatters parts in all directions. It's about an 18 square mile area. The difference is, because it's a hurricane and because it was a wooden vessel, so many of these elements floated. Even if the boat were broken in half or broken in 2 or 3 pieces, it would still be light enough to be moved across the bottom by wave action or wind or currents or anything like that. So you have a very high energy zone out there.
The Spanish fleet, having picked up emeralds from Colombia, pearls from Venezuela, silver and gold from Peru, was sailing from Havana, Cuba, when the hurricane struck. The Atocha and the Margarita sank in about 50 feet of water off the Florida Keys. Scattered over several miles by further storms, the ships were lost for centuries until research in the Spanish Naval Archives in Seville revealed documents which led Fisher here, to the treacherous Marquesas Keys, a group of small islands 20 miles south of Key West. The archives also contained the manifests, complete lists of the ship's cargo, so Fisher and his company, Treasure Salvers, knew exactly what they were looking for, an estimated $400 million worth of treasure.
So we come around the corner here, the large gray building you'll see off to the right is the headquarters of Mel Fisher's Treasure Salvers. He's the gentleman who brought up all the gold, silver, and artifacts off the wrecks of the Atocha and the Margarita, 2 Spanish galleons that sank off our coast 4 centuries ago. To date, he has brought up approximately $60 million worth, and if you've never seen real Spanish treasure before, like gold doubloons, pieces of 8, gold chains, gold bars, they do have an excellent display in here.
Although the main treasure still eluded Fisher, the Treasure Salvers Museum in Key West displays some spectacular objects he's already found. These are on show as part of the Mel Fisher Maritime Heritage Society, and he tries to keep them together. Don Kincaid.
Most of the bullion that was carried on board Atocha and Margarita was in bar form or discs. Most of the silver bars weigh in excess of 60 pounds. Many of them weigh up to 75 pounds. The silver tends to be 2,380 parts out of a possible 2,400 parts pure, so it's very, very pure silver. The silver coins are approximately the same purity. Most of them, the pieces of 8, are about an ounce of silver. They were the coin of the realm back in those days and were legal tender almost all over the world. This is a 12-foot long, 6.5-pound gold chain. It's 24 karat, and most of the links are about 3/4 of an inch in diameter. It was probably used as money back in the old days, since there wasn't enough coinage being minted in the New World at that time. Most of the gold that was found aboard Margarita and Atocha was in bar form or disc form. The Roman numerals that are on there indicate the purity of the gold. This is 23.5 carats. 2 dots indicates that each one is a grain. It takes 4 grains to make a carat. The larger disc that's in there weighs 6.5 pounds. The chunks that are off of it are another 3 pounds or so. There are several of them that are missing. They were probably broken off to use to pay the taxes on other items, perhaps a head tax on slaves or tobacco or something of that nature.
I always was interested in the old history and the pirates and the treasure as a kid. And so I kind of took it up as a hobby. Then each year I'd take a longer vacation and maybe a 3-week vacation to go treasure hunting. And then I took a 6-week vacation the next year and a 3-month vacation the next year. And then finally we got back from one of these 3-month vacations, and I asked my wife if she'd like to just take a 1-year vacation and go treasure hunting. And she said, let's go. So I've been doing it ever since. Kind of got hooked.
Over the years, Mel and his wife, Dolores, have had many setbacks, but the worst was in 1975 when tragedy came to the Fisher family. Their eldest son and his wife were drowned in a boat accident. Problems with other treasure hunters, with the Florida state authorities about ownership of finds, and even with the federal government have hampered the search for years. But there's always been the excitement and just enough financial reward for the quest to continue.
Piece by piece, we'd find one gold bar, and then another gold bar, and then maybe one little teeny gold coin. It just seemed to slowly come through, and it was very enticing, but a lot of hard work and a lot of money and time, and very hard to find gold.
Well, the site is 30 miles from the nearest port, so you have the logistical problem not only of going out and the amount of time that it spends to go out there, the amount of fuel that it takes to go out and to come back. You have to be able to live out there for X amount of time. 3 days, 5 days, mechanical breakdowns are a problem, the weather. The excavation itself is very, very difficult. When we've got all of our boats operating, it costs about $12,000 a day to operate. Also, the wreck site is scattered over a tremendous area. I don't think that any modern treasure hunter or archaeological organization has worked that far out at sea before and that far away from mechanics and electronica repairmen and things like that. You have to be completely self-sufficient out there, and that's very expensive.
Well, if I could have the budget that I want to have, it'd be about a little over $2 million a year I'd like to spend. But usually I don't have that much, so I can get by on $1 million a year.
In the 18 square miles over which the wreck of the Atocha is strewn, Mel Fisher's boats have found 12,000 anomalies or disturbances on the seabed, any one of which could be treasure. With the help of metal detectors, the divers can investigate about 2,000 of these anomalies each year.
.9% of the material that's found out there is modern. The area has been a marine junkyard for 350 years. We found a flatbed truck 50 miles out at sea. We found baby carriages, airplanes, parts of a submarine, a minefield, some 8,000 military bombs, since it's a bombing range out there. There's lots of junk out there.
If it doesn't cut back in another hour or two, then you might have to unplug the regulator. At the same time, go ahead and check the hydrometer readings of the batteries. If the battery is still down, tire down right there. That's good, Greg. We'll kick it in, Phil.
Yeah, the stuff they found there looks interesting. That stone cannonball. There was 10 balls of stone and 50 of iron for each gun on the Atocha. And they found one of those hand-hewn stone cannonballs, and also a nail and a piece of pottery right where they're digging there. So that means the Atocha must have been there.
Oh, here, man. Sorry about that.
This little silver jewel box was found on the Atocha by one of the divers very late in the evening with a metal detector.
I was getting low on air, so I signaled to the other two divers and said, let's go up and dig again, and I'm out of air, you know, we'll change tanks. So they started heading back to the boat, and when they did that, I made one more pass at it with the metal detector. I was going to remark it with a bunch of rocks, and I got a pretty strong hit, so I figured I'd make one more try at it, and I stuck my arm straight down into the sand without digging. Just kind of clawed my way straight down, and I got up to the shoulder and just barely reached something, and I grabbed it and I pulled it up, and I looked at it, and my first impression was, it's a sardine can, you know, because we find a lot of those out there.
The diver gave it to me saying, it's probably a sardine can, and I don't think so. And I started to open it. It took an hour to etch it away, and at that point I had 25 people around me.
You know, when we opened that box up and I saw green and gold in the shape of a cross, it just, you know, I freaked out. Couldn't believe it.
The emerald cross and ring that were inside was beyond anybody's imagination when the thing was found. On the back side is a St. Anthony as well as a Virgin Mary. There's approximately 65 carats worth of stones in the cross. Now that's over $1 million worth of stones alone. The ring, the single stone is about 15 carats. Again, it's a type of stone that ranges from $20,000 to $80,000 a carat. This is a gold poison cup that was found on Atocha. It was originally crushed when it was found and contained some stones in there. There was an easily identifiable emerald of about 1.5 carats. The handles are dolphins, although they're originally thought to be sea serpents. The pedestal that's on the inside contained a stone called a bezoar stone. The stone had the property of attracting arsenic, which was the most popular poison back in those days. In order to achieve any position of power back then, you had to step on a lot of people. So a person of high rank would have something like this as protection. It has been proven in the 20th century that it does actually have the property of attracting arsenic. When some of the divers started finding bits and pieces of jewelry that were separated and found individually on the ocean floor, they had great speculation as to what it might be. When they brought it up to the surface and started cleaning it, one of the divers thought that it looked real familiar to him, so he went back to a book that was on board the salvage vessel at the time and found a portrait of Catherine, the daughter of Philip II, wearing a belt that had the same exact design as the individual links that we had found. So when we collected most of the links, there are 23 of them at this point, and put them all together, you have a very, very nice cinta, which was the Spanish word for belt back then.
Finally, it began to add up to where we had about $6 million worth of treasure in the vaults, but we'd also spent about $6 million to get it in, and so at that time the federal government moved in, and they said, well, it's all ours. We're going to take it all, the whole thing. And I couldn't believe it, that after all the years of work and the millions of dollars I'd spent, they were just going to take it all, you know. And I had a lot of investors and people that were supposed to get part of the treasure. The state of Florida had possession of it at the time, and 2 or 3 times I went up and tried to get it away from the state, and they wouldn't give it to me. And it took several years and about another $1.5 million just for the court costs and legal fees. But we did succeed in beating the federal government and the state of Florida. So now the Atocha and the Margarita are just free and clear our property.
One of the court's recommendations, an idea instigated by treasure salvers, was that when a permit for salvage was granted, the team should do proper archaeology. That is, to record and preserve their findings.
Find anything?
Mel and his technical team had invented various new devices which revolutionized underwater salvage techniques. The mailbox, as Fisher calls it, is a metal structure used to deflect the wash from the propeller down towards the ocean bed and clear the sand covering the site. It is claimed by some academic archaeologists that this method of excavation can damage the artifacts and might also blow away any small objects. The suction pole uses compressed air to lift loose material from the seabed. It might also lift and lose small but historically important pieces. Treasure hunting and archaeology, say most archaeologists, cannot coexist. Treasure salvers may have won the legal right to all they find, but there are those who have laws of their own. Fisher's crews have been shot at on several occasions in skirmishes with other treasure hunters, modern-day pirates, who try to poach on their territory. Treasure is trouble.
That's the Mistal. They came out, I'd say, about a couple of weeks ago. They've been looking for treasure in the same primary areas that we've been looking for. And, I'm not sure exactly what they're doing, but they've definitely been south of our injuncted area. And I've just been trying to stay away from them, and they've been trying to stay away from us. We don't want to have any trouble out here.
It's the same guy, you know, that we had trouble with back in 1979 and 1980 and 81. He never gives up, you know, but he gets all of his information instead of going to the archives and doing research like we do. He goes into our courtrooms when we're having a court case and sits in there and takes notes, and on all the, you know, locations where anchors were found and cannons were found and gold was found and so on, and then comes back out here and tries to capitalize on it out at sea. It's cheaper for him to go treasure hunting in the courtroom than it is to do it in the archives.
Well, I use a lot of different methods of financing the operation. Let's see, last week I borrowed some money using gold bars for collateral, and then the week before that I borrowed some against some gold chains that we had found. And once in a while I can't pay the loan back and the people get to keep their collateral, you know. But as often as possible I try to pay off on my loans, and then I can borrow more later when I want to.
This coral rosary on display in the museum is only a replica. The original was given to an investor, Mr. Cobb, as part of his share of the treasure. It's now locked away out of sight. Mr. Cobb's lawyer has come to collect the next installment of the share ad.
Well, they've received a division of the treasure sometime in the latter part of the 70s, covering, I think, the best, most valuable piece was a rosary, which is the oldest one, supposedly, in the world. They've had it on exhibit, but right now it's in their safety deposit box.
It's just sad to be in a little dark box somewhere. Complete like it is. It's the coral beads and the gold. We find bits and pieces of them where the parts is missing, but one that's had a definite history is this, to go down in a shipwreck and to know the ship that it went down on. This is just so beautiful a story, and so sad to be kind of lost, and lost away from the rest of the treasure.
I picked up 2 gold bars, a gold chain, and a taper holder, and a greenstone amulet. I believe Mr. and Mrs. Cobb would prefer to get just gold. But of course, it's impossible. I imagine the others would too.
I've seen gold turn people on. I've seen it in children and old people, and it's funny. We'd take this chain, we used to give it to the people in the gift shop and let them hold it, and some will look at it and say, gee, that's nice, and what's it worth? And others will go, they get this strange look, and they kind of get drifty, and they stare off at it, and then they hold it up to themselves.
Oh, she can't get it off. She
Oh, got by it. And I say, a little old lady will pick it up sometimes, and they would stroke the gold. It's just, there is a gold fever.
That's $500,000. Whoa. I'm a rich person for about 10 seconds.
The summer of 1984 saw the start of another privately funded excavation. At Ramsgate, off the south coast of England, a team of local divers was attempting to salvage the wreck of an East Indiaman, the Admiral Gardner, which foundered in 1809 on the Goodwin Sands. The Admiral Gardner was sailing for India with a cargo of iron and metal objects, including anchors, door locks, nails, and coins, when she ran aground. The project director, salver and amateur archaeologist Richard Lahn, and his wife Bridget are veterans of the Goodwin Sands, perhaps the most treacherous sandbanks in the world. Moving with the tides and currents, they suddenly open to reveal a wreck, and then, just as suddenly, engulf it again. The Goodwins are a graveyard for ships. Compared with the Gulf of Mexico, the physical conditions here are harsh. It's cold, the visibility is poor, and the wreck lies in much deeper water.
Yeah, okay, all right. Right, here we go.
There is practically no public funding for underwater archaeology in Britain. Like Mel Fisher's excavation in Florida, the salvage and eventual sale of the ship's cargo is vital in order that the project can continue. These coins were specially minted for the East India Company and would have been legal tender in the Madras area had they reached their destination. Lahn uses a similar device to Fisher's suction pole. He calls it a hoover. The coins are sucked up and spewed out into a metal basket on the deck above. They are in denominations called 10 and 20 cash and stamped with their mint date of 1808. There are hundreds of thousands of coins still stored in their barrels under the sea. In 1984, the wreck of the Admiral Gardner was unprotected. The Ministry of Transport considered it to be outside the 3-mile territorial limit, and so the divers could salvage as much as possible, as fast as possible. Their 3-week excavation was considered a success. But of course, until the booty is sold, it's impossible to discover if they've made a profit. It's hardly the kind of treasure that would have impressed Fisher.
The way that this is set up, if you have silver from the Atocha, it is 7 times the daily spot on the market, and if you have gold, it's 10 times the daily.
Wow, it's been very, very exciting, I'll tell you. My son Kane had been following this trail for 4.5 years, finding nothing but ballast stones and nails and more ballast stones and nails, and finally it petered out and there was nothing there. So I got all my boats to gang up on the end of Kane's trail there, and they all started digging in all directions and detecting, and we picked up the trail again and went about another 3 or 4 miles down the ocean, and lo and behold, we found a big, big pile. How about that?
Hey! Let me go there, There you boy, drop it.
Well, we found about 170,000 silver coins. We found almost 1,000 silver bars that weigh, the average is about 70 to 100 pounds each. We found over, let's see, I think it's 215 gold bars, about 3,000 emeralds, about 150 to 200 feet of gold chain, which makes over almost 500 feet of gold chain from the Atocha alone.
Tons and tons of silver bars and a couple hundred gold bars and beautiful gold chains and lots of beautiful green emeralds, green stones. Very exciting.
Oh, you guys ain't gonna believe this one. More gold than King Tut. Real beauty.
They're heavy.
3, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17, 18.
From 1973, Treasure Salvers had employed a full-time archaeologist and a team of conservationists, but their techniques had still been heavily criticized by some academic archaeologists. They were working on a low budget, but now they had found the ship's hull and her mother lode. It was essential to get extra help. Duncan Mathewson, Director of Archaeology for the past 12 years, had more important matters than gold on his mind.
I was so excited when I first saw the whole line of the ship all laid out. I began to hyperventilate. And the best thing that I could think of doing was to go down to the bottom immediately, look for the nearest silver bar, and simply hold on to it until I calmed down. Well, we have found a huge collection of artifacts, all very nicely associated with one another, resting on top of a huge pile of silver bars, chests of coins, all types of silver and gold treasures. And what we've been doing is very carefully mapping and measuring, photographing in position all these artifacts as they're associated one with another on top of the wooden hull structure. Over the years, I've been able to do a lot of training of the company employees, and I've been able to bring in a lot of other archaeologists from the academic community. And right now we've got a team of 15 people, including several PhDs, including several students working for their master's degree. So we've got a team of archaeologists, historians, ship historians, shipbuilders, cartographers, photographers, draftsmen, you name it. We're all working together with Treasure Salvers to be sure that we document all the archaeological information that we recover as we recover the objects themselves.
In October the following year, a full-scale archaeological excavation was underway. The remaining timbers of the Nuestra Senora de Atocha were lifted to safety. They had survived in the water for 364 years. The next few hours were critical if the wood was to be preserved for posterity. The timbers had to be kept wet, or they would crack and vital information such as chisel marks and spike holes lost. In the event, these clues were to suggest a reason for the ship's destruction.
Well, whoever built the Atocha, I think his name was Alonso Ferreira, was cheating on the contract. He signed a contract with the Spanish government, and the ship had to be so long and so wide and built to such and such specifications. And he was late on his contract. He had several other ships to build along with it, and he was running late, so he did a real quick and real dirty job, and he used inferior materials. And finally, when she left Havana and was destroyed in a hurricane, the places that we have found major structural damage, not only from the striking of the reef, are the places where she had prior troubles listed in the research.
The timbers have been brought in, and they will remain in a safe, protected lagoon area in seawater, where we're going to make them available for students that come to Florida Keys Community College, and make them available to the scholars who we're inviting to come in and help us to draw the lines of the ship so we can reconstruct what the galleon looked like. We know more about Greek and Roman ships than we know about Spanish galleons. And by putting these timbers in an academic setting, we're hoping that we're going to learn an awful lot more, not only about Spanish galleons, but about shipbuilding techniques here in the Americas.
Conservation and preservation is a vital part of archaeology, and the Treasure Salvers laboratories are constantly in use, cleaning, photographing, and drawing the finds. There are over 170,000 coins to be recorded, so computers have been brought in to help. Each coin is given a number, photographed, weighed, and noted. A fully detailed certificate is printed out. These coins will be divided up amongst investors, who may eventually sell them, perhaps at Las Vegas.
I don't approve of the idea of selling artifacts. To my way of looking at life, it's an unethical thing for an archaeologist to do. For a treasure hunter, it is not an unethical thing to do. They have been able, through the sale of these artifacts and the publicity, to gain a lot of notoriety for their, a lot of publicity, I should say, for their cause. And they are in the process of doing a very wise thing, is that they are buying respectability by bringing archaeologists in now to help work with them in both the excavation and in the conservation and interpretation. And I think basically that's exactly what I would have done had I been in Mel Fisher's shoes also.
I think that the people who are involved in looking for and collecting artifacts from the ocean's bottom are out to make money. And in that regard, they cannot do archaeology the way it should be done. It's just not possible. Archaeology requires a considerable amount of care. You must take it slowly. You must be very careful about what you're doing. And you must document everything, every bit of the way. I think that is almost antithetical to looking for treasure, for its value. And so I see the issue as one in which the clash of values exists between whether the material is worth something historically and for the benefit of the nation as a whole, or whether it's worth something for private individuals.
If the motive is treasure hunting and not archaeology, then it cannot be good archaeology, regardless of how many shipboard archaeologists are brought in. It's the same as in a hospital. You know, who's going to run the operating room, the surgeon or the, if it's a private hospital, the person that's making the money? I mean, it has to be one thing or the other, and it can't be archaeology and profit at the same time, because the archaeologist spends as much time as possible to do an accurate, slow, careful job, whereas the treasure hunter must make a profit, and therefore he will do things more quickly.
Yes, when I first arrived, there was of course, a great interest in gold and silver, and of course there will always be that interest. But I think over a period of time, there has been a slow change in attitude. As the staff has been enlarged, as I've been able to train more people within the company itself, as I've been able to draw young graduate students into the operation, as I've begun to develop more laboratory conservation facilities, as we've begun to do more methodical record keeping, mapping, all the normal things that archaeologists like to do on land sites. As we've done all that, there has been a very noticeable change, not necessarily in the company as a whole, but outside. Other archaeologists now are working with the private sector more and more.
They say without private enterprise, no one would find the wrecks. We in Turkey have found 75 wrecks in the last decade, and we don't sell one splinter of wood from anything. In fact, we go the next step. We actually put the ships back together, which costs more than the diving, and we spend more money on conservation and preservation and displays than we do on the excavation, and yet the treasure hunters don't do that, and they say they can't afford to do it without the selling the things.
I've taken a lot of hard knocks over the years, but I think that the record will prove that we have done a very good job in terms of saving a lot of information which would have been lost otherwise.
Laws regarding the preservation of historic shipwrecks vary from country to country, and even from year to year.
This winter, the wreck became a designated site, which means it's now protected by English law under the Protection of Wreck Act. And we are now continuing the investigation of the wreck site this year, and also attempting to remove the attractive commodity down there, which is obviously would otherwise bring in other divers, and that is the very large amount of copper coin.
The Ministry of Transport had decided the Admiral Gardner was within the 3-mile limit of territorial waters. They demanded that a professional archaeologist be present to supervise the dig. Ian Spooner is a firm believer in professional archaeologists working alongside amateurs. It's the only way, he says, to get anything done at all.
Well, of course, we've done a large quantity of coins, as we expected, 10 and 20 cash pieces in barrels. We're hoping to be able to raise a barrel full of coins, an entire barrel, but so far the concretion down there has prevented that. There's a lot of iron in this cargo, steel, bar stock which is being exported to India, anchors and cannonballs, all in this mound of cargo with the copper, and the steel or the iron has created corrosion products and made it a vast rock-hard lump of concretion, which is a great disadvantage. We don't have that soft core we were hoping for.
Because the ship's cargo is welded together so firmly, the team must use explosives to loosen the artifacts.
Stand by. Fire in the hole!
The use of explosives, in this case plaster gelignite, may seem a violent solution. But in a situation like this, and when properly supervised, it's a recognized method of excavation.
If the archaeological guidelines, which I've set down, and which are the normal archaeological guidelines which any other archaeologist would impose on the expedition, are not adhered to, well, certainly if I found that divers were going off to the stern of the ship and looking on their own behalf for personal possessions from the officers' crew's quarters, if they were up there looking for the ship's cash chest, that sort of thing, that would certainly be in direct contravention of the contract which I drew up with the group. And I could have the work on the site stopped overnight just by telephoning the Minister of Transport.
It means that we have to observe certain codes of practice, which I hope we would observe anyway, that you do not recover material willy-nilly, that you make sure that there are ways of preserving it or conserving it as is necessary, having got it up. And whereas before, perhaps with an unprotected wreck, there might be a tendency amongst some of the team to say, well, let's get it all up on deck and look at it, we've got to slow down.
In the event, Ian Spooner had to stop the excavation because some of the contract divers were going too fast. and would not accept proper supervision. They were more keen on the money than on the archaeology. Ironically, after the dig had been stopped, the Ministry of Transport de-designated the wreck. So now it's a free-for-all again. Richard Larne and Ian Spooner did manage to find an intact barrel of coins, but selling them proved to be difficult. The enterprise was a disaster for all concerned.
Silver coins. Silver coins. Silver coins. Anybody over in England want to buy a silver coin?
I know which bag.
10, 9, 8, 7.
The highlight of the treasure salver's year is the share out.
4, 3, 2.
The computer has printed out for 3 days to divide the treasure fairly between staff and investors. Fisher had to share an estimated $170 million worth. A happy day for some people, an unhappy day for most archaeologists.
Sandy would like to know that the society got, it's the 77-carat emerald. Now that's one thing that, we all wanted to stay in the museum, and just by the random draw of the computerization, the Heritage Society ended up with it.
I always said, folks, I don't want to own it, I just want to get to play with it.
What'd you get? Oh my God! Oh, I got a lot of coins. I got a beautiful emerald. And 2 silver bars. Nice silver bars. Oh my God! Thank you. You worked for it. Oh, thank you, Tammy. Oh, thank you. Hi, Mom. Hi, Mom. All right. Silver bar. Silver bar. Silver bar, silver coins, copper ingot, and a gold coin.
I got a copper ingot. I have a lot of silver coins, a silver plate, and a silver bar. Hi, Mom and Dad. Dad, you got a great Christmas present coming.
I bought a dream, and I always knew it was there, and bought Mel's dream. And a dream coming true, it's all the Christmases and all your good things in one.
Christmas! Oh my goodness, my goodness, my goodness.
We have just made over $1 million between, actually $1.5 million between the three of us, and we are happy boys.
We'll keep on hunting till I die, though. I'll be treasure hunting forever. Got it in my blood.
Before that, we